Hello gamers, Yoshi here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the Titan. Whoops, got some. Hello gamers, Yoshi here, and in today's video stream, which I'm streaming on twitch.tv/stormstrikex, if you want to check me out, even though I effectively have only been streaming these tier lists. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the Titan armor pieces. This first part is going to be the PvE tier list for the armor pieces, and then the next part will be the PvP portion, and that will wrap up all the exotic armor pieces and exotic weapons. And then I think eventually down the road I'll redo. I had a video for all the usable legendary weapons. However, I've just kind of that video got corrupted and it took a lot of time to make it. So I've just kind of been putting it off, but I'm thinking I'm going to redo that video and tier all the usable legendary weapons in this game. Not that anyone asked for it, but I just wanted to kind of make it because no one else has done it. And without further ado, let's get right into the Titan exotics. And this is for PvE. So the first helmet we've got here is One-Eyed Mask. And what One-Eyed Mask does now is that enemies who tag you are highlighted in like a orange yellow color. And what you do is you kill this target and you get an overshield. It used to work that when you killed this target, you would also get Vengeance, which is a damage buff. I don't believe you get Vengeance anymore. They removed that because it was actually kind of busted. If it were still in this meta, you could like 2-tap with 120s and PvP. But for PvE, getting an overshield can be kind of nice. But I don't think that wasting wasting your exotic when there are much like better exotics in this list that can provide you like better utility than One-Eyed Mask is such a great exotic to pick. I wouldn't say it's like down in the dumps like F tier, like completely useless, but I wouldn't say like it's exceptionally good. Like getting an overshield definitely is nice, but it's not an uninterrupted overshield. So like once you get tagged, it pretty much goes away. I'm pretty sure that's how it functions now. You don't get vengeance anymore, and it doesn't exactly heal you. It just gives you an overshield. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it heals you. It gives you that healing anymore like it used to. It just gives you the overshield. You lose the overshield, you're back to normal health. Before, it would constantly heal you and give you the overshield at the same time, which was stupid OP. So right now, I think it's kind of just like a D tier exotic. Next up is Eternal Warrior. Eternal Warrior on your Fist of Havoc super cast, you get an overshield for Fist of Havoc. Fist of Havoc, don't think it's a really good super right now for PvE, especially when Thunder Crash and the Falling Star chest piece exotic exists. Really think this is just like an F tier exotic. Next up, we have Kefri's Horn, not to be confused with Kefri Sting, which is the Hunter Gauntlets. Kefri's Horn allows you to, when you do solar damage, energy weapon kills, or heavy weapon kills, or I think abilities count as well. It regenerates your barricade. When you cast your barricade, doesn't matter if it's the tower or the rally barricade, it casts a solar, um, kind of like a thermite grenade wave out from your shield. I believe it extends out to a certain point and then it comes back into your shield. Um, Not all too useful in PvE, but I wouldn't completely write it off. Honestly, I feel like One-Eyed Mask is kind of better, and the fact that having an overshield. So I'm gonna move One-Eyed Mask up to C tier and give Kefri's the D tier treatment right now. Next up, we have Precious Scars. Precious Scars, pretty much when you heal, or sorry, when you revive an ally, it grants you this like protection aura. between you and your teammates, and that just gives you like everyone like an overshield, and you have to stay within a couple meters of your allies when you have this buff procced. Has potential for some PvE activities. However, and activities like Grandmaster content where you would think that, oh, reviving a teammate would be nice, or in Master content, reviving a teammate would be nice. You get this overshield that protects you and your teammates, or in a raid. However, in a in GMs, the most important thing is for Titans currently is like chaining supers, and the best way to chain supers in Grandmaster content is to run in with the Middle Tree Void, the Banner Shield with Ursa Furiosa, and guard, and you get a ton of your super back after you're finished guarding. That is if ads are doing enough damage to you, and then on top of that, it's just I don't know. It's just like I can't really justify using this exotic, especially when there are better like damaging exotics that exist in the first place. So really, to me, it has potential in some activities, but I can only justify running this exotic if you don't have access to any of these other exotics, or maybe you don't have access to the Forsaken Supers, which Banner Shield is a Forsaken Super, and if you have Ursa Furiosa, it's kind of useless to you because you can't use Banner Shield. So then maybe I think it would have potential, but um, Um, I feel like being giving it C tier is too generous. It's definitely a D tier exotic. I wouldn't say it's completely useless. It does have its uses, but it's just I don't know. I haven't ever used it, so I mean that kind of tells you where this is going to be placed in my tier list for PvE. Next up, we have Helm of Saint 14, instant S tier. This helmet is so good, especially if you're running Top Tree Void and you're running Word of Dawn. And PvE, Word of Dawn, insanely good because of the damage buff it gives you. I believe it's about 35% ish. And not only do you get the damage buff from Ward, well, now the bubble gives you an overshield to you and your allies when they pass through your bubble. And the other thing is when enemies run into your bubble, they become blinded because of the effects from Saint's Helm. And just because Ward of Dawn is just so damn good, pairing it with another exotic that just buffs your bubble even farther, it's just a no brainer that you would take this exotic into PvE activities. Just like Ward is just so good. It's so good for any activity. It doesn't matter that you don't get kills with the super. The super helps you stay alive. It helps your teammates stay alive. It helps them you and your allies do more damage to targets. So definitely it's worth it to be using. Um Next up we have I can never pronounce it right. It's an insuf I have it here. An insurmountable skull fort. I always mispronounce it when I say it. An insurmountable skull fort. This thing, what it does is when you get arc melee kills, it heals you and it refunds your melee. So you can pretty much just go around with Fist of Havoc and you can just shoulder charge enemies constantly. That is guaranteed you are getting kills and you get your melee back and you get healed. Um, or you can do the middle tree as well and you can get your middle tree back. And the thing is with the middle tree arc slam is that when you slam down on the ground, depending on how many enemies you kill around you, you also gain super energy from that. So this actually has a lot of potential if used correctly. And I think because of how it can refund your super energy for middle tree, I think it places it at C tier. I think B tier might be pushing it a little because of how this exotic has to compete with something like the newer exotics, like the Falling Star. chess piece. Where is it? Right here from the current season. This is like an S tier exotic. I would never take this over something like this. Maybe this if I'm trying to have fun or something, but this is like an S tier. Like if you're using Middle Tree Arc, Thunder Crash, I'm going to be taking this any day of the week over this. And that's why it's really hard to give Skullfort a B tier when something like this exists that can do its job a lot better. And then last but not least, we have the Mask of a Quiet One. And Mask of a Quiet One, what it does is if you are low health, you get I think it activates healing and you get melee healing. Let me just check in the list here. 20% of players' health when a grenade deals damage to an enemy. I think this is wrong. I think yeah, here it is. Grants melee, grenade, and class ability energy when damaged. Void ability kills grant health regeneration. That's the part I always miss is the void ability kills grants health regen. It's like a better version of this, but for void. And if you're critically low, it just buffs all your abilities. I think it has potential for PvE, definite B tier, but I don't see a lot of people running this, just because of how many other exotics exist. It's really hard in this game to not say exotics for PvE are D or F or AS. It's really hard to assign a lot of exotics to C or B tier just because of how like black and white it is in terms of like what is good and what isn't. There's no like, oh, this is just middle of the road. Um, you know, it's like it's either trash or it isn't. And I wouldn't say it's trash really, and I wouldn't say it's god tier either, but I would say it's on the upper tier of like the mid zone for sure. Next up, we have nothing. That concludes the helmets. So next we're going to be talking about gauntlets. The first gauntlet we have is Ashen Wake, and what Ashen Wake does is it pretty much buffs your fusion nades. It makes it so your fusion nades instantly explode when they hit the ground or hit targets, instead of attaching and then detonating. And if you get fusion nade kills, you're refunded grenade energy. And if you pair Ashen Wake with Middle Tree Solar with Burning Maul, and you have the Roaring Flame stacks. If you have three stacks of Roaring Flames, I believe you pretty much get your nade back on a fusion grenade kill. I don't know about that in PvE. Don't quote me on that, but I know for sure in PvP, if you have like two stacks of Roaring Flames, you pretty much get your fusion nade back if you get a kill with it. Pretty good in PvP. PvE, with where Burning Maul is pretty decent, but I just wouldn't use. If I'm using Burning Maul, I would probably use Hollow Fire Heart instead. Or if I'm using any of the solar ones, I would probably use Phoenix Cradle. I think is a little bit better for the solar ones. Um, Armamentarium, so you can have like two thermite nades. I think the thermite nades are a lot better for PvE. I think it definitely can be a fun exotic. It's just fusion nades are just not the move for they're not the play for PvE. Fusion nades I don't think are that great for PvE, and like buffing them with an exotic like this, I just don't think you're gonna really benefit in PvE activities using Ashen Wake. Um, I'm gonna have to give it F tier just because of how crap I think fusion nades are for PvE activities. Next, we have Doomfang Pauldron. What Doomfang Pauldron does is, uh, if you're running the Sentinel Titan and you super with the shield, it refunds you energy, extending effectively, or it refunds a little bit of super and it also refunds energy for your shield, so you can effectively spam shields. Um, and the other thing is that if you shoulder bash or shield bash with it, you're refunded super energy. So if you're looking to do a quick super build for bottom tree void, you can get a um 4 kill super with Doomfangs doing bottom tree and using something like Monte Carlo so you can get your melee back faster. I think it works in PvE relatively the same as it does in PvP. I know in PvP it's pretty much a 4 kill shield bash super. Not sure how it is in PvE, but the fact that you can get supers really quick with bottom tree void, pretty good considering how good using supers are in this game. Um, I definitely would have to give this A tier just because of how frequently you can get your super with bottom tree void, and especially if you pair this with something like Monte Carlo, or you just have 100 strength, so you can always have high uptime on your melee, or find any way to get your melee back faster. This is definitely a top tier exotic, I think. Next, we have Synthoceps. Synthoceps, what they do is they buff your melee lunge range, so you can lunge a little bit farther to hit melee hits. And then the other thing it does is it buffs your melee damage while you are surrounded, and it will buff your super damage while you're surrounded. So if you're in Thunder Crash, it will buff Thunder Crash's damage if you're surrounded, and it will also just buff your melee in general when you are surrounded. I think for Thunder Crash, definitely makes Middle Tree Thunder Crash good, or just really any of your melees will just be extremely good. However, now that Synthosets has to compete with Curious of the Falling Star, it's really hard to give this a higher tier rating just because it has to compete with this, just like how Skullfort has to compete with this. Um, I think this is more of just like a B tier exotic. If this didn't exist, this would be higher, like A or S. But since Falling Star exists now, this is more of just like a B tier exotic. I would definitely use this if you don't have access to this, just because it buffs your Thunder Crash damage when you're surrounded, and it's pretty easy to get surrounded in PvE. So definitely pick this up if you don't have Falling Star yet. Next, we have ACD Feedback Fence. Um, I sometimes call it ACDC Feedback Fence just because it's such a its name is so close to that. But it's ACD Feedback Fence. What it does is melee hits store energy, and when you are meleeed yourself, it releases a burst of energy which kills your target that's meleeing you. It's a little bit better in PvP than I think it is in PvE. In PvE, you're probably not getting beat on, like melee beat on by a lot of enemies. They're probably already dead if they're that close to you. In high end content, if you get meleeed, you're pretty much just dead. So not that useful in end game content. Like at least with this, you just have to be near enemies. They don't have to be hitting you to proc Synthoceps Bionic, um, whatever it's called, Bionic Synergy or something like that. With this, you have to be getting hit for it to proc its perk. Maybe for low tier content, it could be good, but really, I don't think letting yourself get hit, or just, I mean, if you're punching a lot of enemies, it charges it up, and then you get hit and it consumes it. And I don't think you getting hit is gonna kill the enemy hitting you. If it's a red bar, it's probably gonna kill that red bar, but it's not going to matter anyways. If that red bar hits you, you're probably just going to shoot it in the head and insta kill it if you were to not have these. And the other thing is, if you're in GM content, you're just going to die anyways if you get bitch slapped by an ad. Or in a master content, it might be helpful in raids maybe, But in Rage, you're looking to do more damage with your weapons. You're probably bringing Bubble with Saint, or you're bringing something like Falling Star, or you're bringing something like Aeons into the raid. It's just not a very good exotic. Next, we have Warm God Caress. What this exotic does is it's like the Winter's Guile one. It buffs your melee, and the more melee kills you get, you get increased effects, and it makes the melee damage you do last longer. It's like kind of like a better Synthoceps that scales up instead of just being like a one and done with Synthos. However, mailing ads in this game is not super meta unless you have a 1-2 punch. But the thing is, Liar's Handshake is just does so much more damage than Worm Husk can do. Cross counter is Having cross counter proc with Liar's Handshake is just so much better than what Worm God's Caress can do. And the thing is, Worm God's Caress, I'm not gonna it's not like it hasn't been good in the past. It's definitely been used to one phase Riven just by using shotguns and just one man Riven using shotguns using this exotic and Synthoceps. Definitely wasn't broken or anything like that in the past, but that was from glitches and stuff like that, and retaining perks while switching off certain exotics. So that's been fixed. So it's no longer like that. But I'd say it's just kind of an average middle of the run, just because of how it's like the crappy version of Synthos because it forces you to get melee kills. But I don't think going for melee kills in PvE is your friend, especially in endgame content where you're going to be distancing yourself from enemies. And then next up we have Aeons, instant S tier, just like the other exotic guides. It has the one sect, one cult that allows you Cult of Sect, I believe it is, where you can pretty much just create free heavy. It's a no-brainer to take just because of all the cults and the abilities and how you compare this with your teammates who are also running Aeons. It's a top tier exotic now. The rework has made it gone from F tier to S tier for PvE. Next we have Stronghold. What Stronghold does is it buffs your guard on swords. F tier. I got it and have never used it. It might be helpful for some activities where you can guard, and once you guard and you're hit, you instantly heal. Maybe that's helpful for some people, but not a lot of people guard with their swords in this game, so they can heal. It's such a very, very specific exotic to be using. In endgame content, you'll probably just get one shot if you guard. Guarding is not going to do much for you in terms of blocking damage. Um, Maybe it can be helpful in some solo content, like if you solo a dungeon and you need to heal, you can just block with the sword and you get your health back. Maybe then I can see it having potential there. So definitely maybe D tier, so not absolutely useless. So maybe this is good for solo content. However, it only has that one thing going for it, really. So D tier for me. Next, we have Titans. Titans pretty much allow you to shoot through your towering barricade. The tower barricade. The only thing is that your tower barricade now has less hit points, so it gets destroyed quicker. In PvP, it's like 1 or 2 shotgun shots will pretty much destroy it. In PvE, it's harder to gauge damage because ads do differing amounts of damage to your barricades, but it is safe to say it's a significantly less amount of health that your towering barricade has. I do think it is sometimes useful to be able to shoot through the shield. However, I just think having the barricade on its own with its full health is much more useful than it is to have it with cut health and being able to shoot through it. And having Barricade, Tower Barricade in Grandmaster has definitely saved my team's ass and allowed us to get revives and stuff like that. If we were to have someone running Chitons and a Grandmaster, that thing would just get nuked by a Dreg. I'm pretty sure with one Dreg shot. So not very useful in PvE, probably for lower tiers of content, maybe to using Gambit or something like that. But it doesn't have the same effect that it has in PvP. So D tier. Next we have, oh man, I've forgotten the name. I know what it does. I've just forgotten the name. It's in here somewhere. Yes, I'm cheating. Mantle. What Icefall Mantle does is it pretty much replaces your barricade with a personal overshield. So when you cast the personal overshield, it gives you the overshield. It slows any enemies that are near you within a small radius, and then when you have the overshield, you move slower, which is unfortunate. And the other thing is you don't regenerate your barricade until a certain time period after the overshield ability is gone. So like you'll see a timer on your screen and it'll count down, and once that is over, then you can start regenerating your barricade again. I guess has its uses for solo content. However, if you're running solo content, I would just run some of these other utility based exotics instead. I really don't think giving yourself a personal overshield and also slowing yourself is going to save your ass. I feel like if you're at a point where you need to heal, you need to start healing. I mean, maybe this can save your ass, but if you're like at a point where you're critical health, you're probably getting beamed by something. If you give yourself an overshield, but also make yourself slow, well, now you're slowed, and now you're gonna have to still get beamed by whatever target is beaming you that got you low health, and now you're just slower, but you also have an overshield. I guess it's good. I don't know. D tier for me, just because of the overshield that it grants you. And then last of the gauntlets, we have Ursa Furiosa, instant S tier, just because of how Banner Shield is in this game, with how much super you can get back from guarding with Banner Shield. You pretty much, if there's enough damage being dealt to you when you're running Banner Shield with Ursa's, you pretty much will get like 90% of your super back, and you just have to get a few kills with your guns or pick up some orbs, and you get your super back. And if you have two Ursa Titans or three Ursas, it's just you're chaining supers constantly. It's just banner shield after banner shield after banner shield. It's just such a good exotic to have. It's a must have in Grandmaster content and Master content for Nightfalls. Um, and it's definitely helpful in all other forms of PvE content. And that wraps up the gauntlets. Next, we have are the chess pieces. The first chess piece we have here is Crest of Alpha Luffy. No. Is it? I always get these two one. No, it's Heart of Inmost Light. This is Crest. What Crest does, it gives your supers an additional orb. What Heart does is that when you use one ability, it buffs your other abilities. So say you use your Barricade, it buffs your melee to do more damage, and it makes your nade do more damage. If you use your nade, it buffs your melee, and it makes your Barricade have more hit points. Makes it have more health. And the other thing that it does is when you use one ability, it makes your other abilities have increased regen time. So it's a pretty damn good exotic to be using in PvP, but for PvE, um, I I give it B tier just because of how it buffs your ability regen and how it just makes your other abilities do a lot more damage. I think if you definitely don't have any of these S tier exotics to run around with or these A tier exotics to run around, Heart of Inmost Light is definitely a good exotic to pick up. Next up, we have Crest of Alpha Lupi, and I'm just gonna have to give this C tier. It's not something that exceptionally good, but it's not bad. it makes it so you drop an additional orb of light when you cast your super, or you're getting. I don't know if it works with super kills. I think it's just like if you cast Ward of Dawn, instead of dropping 3 orbs of light, you drop 4 orbs of light. Um, and just that's pretty much how it works. I think it's like if you don't have Saint, then just take Crest, because you can just make more orbs of light, which allows you to chain more supers back to back. It's an okay exotic. It's not something exceptional, but it's not something downright useless, especially with how good um, the orbs of light are that get created from supers. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, is when you make orbs of light from shooting things with your guns, it gives you or sorry, orbs of power, my bad. It gives you a small amount of your super back, your stasis super or your light based super. However, if you pick up orbs from supers that come from super kills or super casts, you get a significantly higher portion of your super granted to you than you would with the weapon kills. So that's why it makes this a pretty okay exotic to be using. Next, we have Severance Enclosure. What this does is when you get a Void Solar or Arc melee kill, it creates a little explosion. Also, if you get a finisher kill, it makes the explosion. It's just it's useless. It's like having the bombardiers, but it's tied to your melee, and it's just it doesn't do enough damage. I don't think it even does enough damage to kill some red bars. It's just kind of useless. They reworked it so you didn't need to do finishers, I think, and now it's just like the melee kills. But it's just so useless. It just doesn't do enough damage where it's like worth taking. Next, we have Armamentarium. All it does is it gives you a second nade charge. Um, Pretty okay, I think. For stasis, it's fun if you get the glacial wall and you plasm and you just slide through the glacial wall. It's good with having 2 thermite nades if you're not taking the class that already gives you 2 nades. It can be good with the voids. You can have 2 of the suppressor nades. It's just a fun exotic to have, but it's also a relatively okay exotic to run as well, especially if you don't have any of these higher tiered exotics on you. Next, we have one of the best exotics they've introduced lately. I believe it's Curious of the Falling Star. I don't know how to say that first word. I do apologize if I mispronounced it. What this does is it pretty much makes your Thunder Crash super do double damage, and it pretty much turns your Thunder Crash super into a boss melter. It pretty much does what Celestial Nighthawk does for top tree or bottom tree gunslinger, and does this to your Thunder Crash. And not only does it buff your Thunder Crash damage, is that over time, and depending on how far you go, it also grants you an overshield based off of that distance that you fly. So S tier exotic just because of how much damage you do with Thunder Crash now. Next we have Actium Warrig. What Actium Warrig does is that it pretty much makes it so you auto load from reserves if you're using an auto rifle or a machine gun. With Sweet Business, you can pretty much shoot forever. With Xenophage, you can pretty much just shoot forever. With Gnawing Hunger, you could shoot forever. It's a pretty good exotic to be using in PvE. Definitely above C tier, definitely a B tier, especially since you can use it with machine guns now, like Xenophage. You can have Xenophage shoot longer without needing to reload. Um, Gnawing Hunger is still a good PvE ad clearing weapon to use, allows you to definitely do a lot of work. However, you need to note you are sacrificing the ability to shoot forever with an auto rifle or a machine gun with something like Ursa's or Aeon's or Saint. It's I feel like B tier is pushing it a little. I think it's more like C tier just because of what's keeping it from being in B tier for me is the fact that you're sacrificing the ability to do like more damage with your super or get your super faster or buff your super, and you're taking it for an exotic that just buffs your auto rifle ammo capacity or your mag size technically, because you can shoot for longer, and yeah, that's pretty much why. Next and last we have is Hollowfire Heart. What Hollowfire Heart does is when it's equipped, it buffs your solar ability regen, and if you have your super, it drastically increases your ability regen, so you get your abilities back faster if you have your super, and you just get them back slightly faster if you don't have your super. Definitely a top tier exotic to be using. It's like kind of like this, except it's always working, and if you have your super, it's working really well in your favor. So I think it's a little higher than B tier just because of how nice it is to constantly have high uptime on all your solar abilities. And if you're not casting your super a lot in PvE, definitely a very good exotic to have. I When I played Titan, I pretty much just ran this until I got better exotics. And like this, I ran it. When I solo, I on my attempt for a solo flawless shatter throne, I pretty much use this as well. It's definitely a top tier exotic. And then last for the Titans for PvE exotic tier list, we have the leg armor. And the first leg armor we have is Peregrine Greaves. What this does is while you're in the air and you use shoulder charge, shield bash, or the shoulder charge, shield bash, or can't remember the last one, but you know what I'm talking about. If you use one of those attacks while you have these on, you do bonus damage while you're in the air. Pretty good when they first came out. Then they got nerfed. Not as powerful as they once were, but still okay. Um, Definitely C tier. They once were S tier, but now they're just kind of like okay exotics to be using. Next, we have Phoenix Cradle. Definitely a definite B tier for me, just because of its uses for PvE and how you can buff your allies with Sun Warrior. What it does is that it extends Sun Warrior, makes Sun Warrior last longer, and the other thing is that now your allies can run through your sunspots and get Sun Warrior. And one of the creative things that I remember one of my clanmates doing is when we did Scourge of the Pass, is I think it was Valiant. Valiant would cast his super while we were doing boss damage to Insurrection Prime, and he if we didn't have a well or another bubble for second phase, he would cast his hammers and he would just throw his hammers to each of the areas we would run to AC or P, and it would create a sunspot there. And since he's running Phoenix Cradle, we would get Sun Warrior, and it would buff our damage at that area. So it definitely has its uses in this game, especially for PvE. It's more of a team based exotic. You probably won't benefit as much in solo content if you're using this, but it has its uses. It's very useful to have. It's very useful to be able to give your teammates Sun Warrior. Next, we have Lion. No, uh, these are Lion Rampants. These are Peacekeepers, right? Let's just double check there. They just look so similar to me. Yes. These are Peacekeepers. What Peacekeepers do is while your SMGs are stowed, it reloads them, and when you bring them out, it gives them like increased handling and reload and whatnot. It's pretty much the Mechaneer's trick sleeves of SMGs for the legs of Titans. And I just don't think it's that great to have. This is better than this because this makes your gun shoot longer, and this just buffs handling and auto reloads them when you don't have them equipped. But it's just like with how many perks there are in this game that can just perform the duty of Peacekeepers, really not that great. It's more F tier for me. Next, we have Antaeus wards. What Antaeus does is when you slide, it creates a little shield and it reflects projectiles, shots, or whatever coming at you. It used to be that if you reflected any shots, it would grant you super. However, when they got nerfed, this got removed. So that is no longer the case. I think sometimes reflecting shots in PvE can be good, but it's such a specific exotic to be using. It just there's all these exotics outclass Antaeus. If Antaeus still had the super gain when blocking shots, and it would be higher because getting super is nice, but it's not like that anymore, so it's not that great. Next, we have Doom Marchers. What Doom Marchers allow you to do is they increase your movement speed, your sliding speed, and while you're running, it charges the Doom Marchers up. And when you punch your next target, it creates a chain of arc damage that chains to nearby enemies. Um, Definitely pretty good exotic to be running. I think it's an A tier exotic for me just because it buffs, not only it buffs your movement speed, but it also can do damage on top of that. And while I think maybe while I wouldn't take it over some of these other exotics, although I would take this exotic over Phoenix Cradle, and I would take it over Syntheseps and Heart of Inmost Light. It's hard to say if I would take it over Hollowfire Heart. So it definitely is A tier, I think, just because it you move around fast, you can get in and out of combat fast. Just having better movement in PvE, I think, is very useful, not just in PvP. And the fact that you just do a little sprinting around and you punch an enemy and then it does damage to the enemy and it chains to other enemies. That's just a pretty, it's just free damage to have just by running around. Next, we have Lion Ramparts, yeah, Rampants. What they do is they pretty much buff your aerial accuracy. So you have like 100% air 100% in air accuracy. And the other thing they do is they make it so you have better movement while in the air. This allows Titans to sword fly if you know what sword flying is. However, its uses outside of sword flying and having 100% in air accuracy, it's just, it's D tier. It's not something I would be running unless I'm trying to sword fly somewhere. And then the last like armor piece we have here is Mark 44 Standicides. What they do is while you're sprinting with your shoulder charge, your shield bash, and that last one that I can't seem to remember for some reason, you get a little overshield. And while if you get a kill with your shoulder charge or whatever, it also refunds melee energy. Don't think it's that great in PvE activities. Probably a little bit better for PvP activities. And yeah, that concludes my PvE Titan exotic tier list. And if you like this type of video, make sure to like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next part of this video, which will be the PvP tier list for the Titan exotics. And thanks for watching.